When I saw folding chairs being unloaded from a rental truck onto my ranch, I thought maybe I was dreaming. But nope, there they were. Dozens of them. Along with a tent, 2 porta-potties, and a DJ booth on my land, without my permission. My name's Xander Jennings. I'm a commercial welder and part-time farrier, and I own a modest 60-acre ranch just outside of town. Been living here for 12 years. Paid it off in 7. Quiet, peaceful mine, or it was until the HOA from the neighboring subdivision started getting bold. That's how I met Elora Simmons, president of the Willow Heights HOA, and a woman who could probably summon a thunderstorm by scowling at the sky. Mid-50s, frosted bob haircut, pearl necklace even when walking her dog, and a voice that could cut drywall. She showed up on my porch 3 days before the chaos started. "You need to move your cattle from the west pasture," she said bluntly, holding a clipboard like it was a legal weapon. I raised an eyebrow. "Why? We've scheduled a wedding there, Saturday afternoon." I laughed. "You scheduled a what? A wedding," she said in that tone people use when they think you're too dumb to follow. "The HOA approved it unanimously. The bride is my niece." I stared at her blankly. "You do know this isn't part of your HOA, right? This is my land," she sniffed. "It's adjacent." The couple wanted a rustic theme. We assumed the field was unused, and frankly, you never made it clear where your property line is. "Oh, I made it clear when I put up the fence you cut through. That wire thing, please. We thought that was for cattle, not property." I took a long breath. "You thought wrong." "Listen," she said, glancing at her clipboard again. "The permits are already printed, vendors are booked, guests are flying in. We really can't change location now. It'll be just a few hours and you'll be compensated. We can offer you $500. I tilted my head. "So you're telling me with a straight face that your HOA scheduled a full wedding on land that doesn't belong to you, didn't ask, and now you're offering me $500 to shut up about it?" She pursed her lips. "It's more than fair." I didn't answer. I just shut the door. Now, someone else might have called the cops. But I knew one thing about Elora Simmons: she played dirty. And I wasn't about to let some clipboard tyrant turn my property into her niece's Pinterest fantasy, so I made one phone call. To a demolition crew. My cousin runs it. "Zan, what do you need cleared?" he asked. "Not cleared," I said, watching from the window as Elora's wedding crew started laying down plywood over my pasture grass. "I need a structure built." "What kind?" "Temporary, but loud. And ugly." By Friday night, a glorious beast stood in the middle of the field, a steel-framed skeleton of a barn in progress, complete with scaffolding, metal beams, and a sign that read, "Heavy demolition in progress, do not enter." The best part, it was within my rights. The ranch is zoned for agricultural and industrial development. I even pulled the permit 2 weeks ago when Elora first started sniffing around. I didn't hear from her until Saturday morning. Her shriek echoed across the hills. Elora's screech broke the usual stillness of a Saturday morning. I was on my porch drinking black coffee when she stormed across the gravel, heels snapping like gunfire against the stones. Behind her, a man in khakis and a pale blue polo followed, carrying what looked like a rolled-up blueprint and a folder stuffed with documents. I recognized him, Adam Gilroy, the HOA's longtime treasurer. Always looked like he'd just been told his sandwich order was wrong. "What is this?" Elora barked, gesturing wildly at the half-built steel structure in the middle of my land. I set my mug down on the porch railing and leaned against the post. "Structure for feed storage, agricultural use, fully permitted." Her eyes narrowed. "You plan this to interfere with the wedding?" "That's a bold accusation," I said, folding my arms. "And a strange thing to say about construction on private property." Adam cleared his throat. "Mr. Jennings, surely this can be resolved amicably. We've put a lot of resources into the event. The DJ's already here. The guests are en route." "We were told this field would be available." "By who?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Elora waved her hand dismissively. "It doesn't matter. What matters is this structure violates the spirit of neighborhood cooperation." "I don't live in your neighborhood. You're adjacent," she snapped. That makes you part of the community. No, it makes me your neighbor, not your subordinate. Adam stepped forward, flipping open his folder. There's also the matter of the fence line. Our landscaper claims it doesn't match the property survey. I tilted my head slightly. Your landscaper, he nodded. He showed us satellite images. They suggest the fence cuts into the green belt. I took a breath, then turned and walked inside. When I came back out, I was holding a surveyor's report one I'd commissioned last year during a water easement dispute. I handed it to Adam. That's from a licensed civil engineer, certified, recorded with the county. He scanned the top page and went pale. Elora tried to snatch it from him, but he turned to the side, shielding it. I think we need to review this, he muttered. You do that, I said. And in the meantime, make sure your DJ doesn't set up a single cable on my grass. They left, fuming. I watched their SUV spin gravel as it peeled out of my driveway, then turned back to the crew and gave the signal to resume work. The welders got back to torching beams, the grinder fired up, and the whole valley filled with the glorious scream of progress. By noon, the guests had started arriving. First came a shuttle bus that tried to drive down the dirt path along the fence line. I flagged it down before it got stuck in a rut. A couple stepped off, dressed in linen and lace, blinking in confusion at the construction site. I politely informed them this was private property and redirected them to the Willow Heights clubhouse 3 blocks away. That happened 4 more times. By the 5th, I'd printed a sign, "Wedding at Willow Heights Clubhouse. This is private land. Trespassers will be prosecuted." That should have been the end of it. But Elora wasn't done. Around 2, I noticed a black SUV parked just beyond the tree line on the east edge of my land. I knew that spot. It was a maintenance access road that Willow Heights had tried to close off 2 years back. Clearly, they'd found a way around the chain. 2 men in button-down shirts and sunglasses were walking toward the structure, pretending to be on their phones. One of my crew, a retired Marine named Kenny, intercepted them. "You gentlemen need something?" They claimed to be with the county, conducting an inspection. Kenny radioed me. I came down from the scaffolding and asked for ID. They didn't have any. Turned out they weren't county inspectors. They were private security hired by the HOA. When I told them to leave, one of them smirked and said, "You might want to be careful. You're interfering with a legal event." I called the sheriff. Deputies showed up within the hour. After a quiet word with the lead officer, Deputy Morales, a guy I went to high school with, they escorted the 2 imposters off the property. While that was happening, I walked the perimeter and found something worse. A section of my fence line on the west side, near the creek, had been cut. Clean through, not just wires snipped, but entire posts removed. They'd cleared a path wide enough for a catering van. I documented everything. Photos time-stamped. Even found the tire impressions leading from the HOA's Greenbelt Road onto my land. That was criminal trespass. And destruction of property. Morales took the report himself. "Want to press charges?" he asked. "Absolutely," I said. "And I want that vehicle impounded." By late afternoon, the wedding guests were crammed into the Willow Heights clubhouse with no view of the hills, no sunset backdrop, and no dance floor. Elora, however, wasn't ready to surrender. At dusk, she returned, this time with a man in a gray suit and a clipboard of his own. He introduced himself as Trevor Langston, their HOA's legal counsel. He tried a new tactic. "We believe this structure may be in violation of noise ordinances," he said, pointing to the grinder still running. "And the signage is misleading." "Everything here is legal and documented," I replied, "but if you want to file a complaint, be my guest. Just make sure you spell my name right in court." Langston hesitated, then leaned in slightly. "Look, Xander. Can I be frank? Only if you don't waste my time." He glanced over his shoulder, then lowered his voice. "This isn't about the wedding anymore. Elora's been trying to expand the HOA's jurisdiction for years. She wants your property annexed. Claims it would unify the community. I told her it wasn't feasible, but she's stubborn. She thought using the wedding as a precedent might give her leverage. Leverage to do what?" I asked, narrowing my eyes. Claim that your land is functionally part of Willow Heights. Use it to request a municipal zoning review. If the county sees your land regularly used by residents, they might reclassify it. And if it's reclassified, you'd be subject to their bylaws. That explained everything. The wedding wasn't just a favor to her niece. It was a land grab. A sneaky, underhanded attempt to establish de facto control over my ranch. I stepped back. You just admitted to a conspiracy to defraud the county. I hope you understand I'm recording this. Langston's face went pale. Wait, I held up my phone. You should know, I added. I already filed a formal complaint with the county zoning board, and Morales is forwarding the trespass report to the district attorney. Langston turned and walked away without another word. The next day, I met with my attorney. Not just to press charges for trespassing and property damage, though we filed those too, but to draft a cease and desist order against the HOA for any further encroachments. We also began preparing a civil suit for attempted annexation under false pretenses. And just to be thorough, I sent a packet of evidence to the county commissioner's office. Photos, maps, the audio recording, a copy of my permit, everything. By Monday morning, Elora Simmons had more than a ruined wedding on her hands. She had a full-blown investigation. By Tuesday, something shifted. The usual morning hum of ranch work was interrupted by the crunch of unfamiliar tires on gravel. A dark blue pickup with county plates rolled up the drive. The man who stepped out was tall, lean, and sharp-eyed Detective Calvin Reed from the county sheriff's investigative division. Not patrol, not zoning. Criminal investigations. He flashed his badge as he approached. "You Jennings?" he asked. I nodded, wiping my hands on a rag. "That's me. I'm following up on a referral from Deputy Morales," Reed said, glancing at the barn frame still standing in the pasture. "Mind if we talk inside?" We sat at the kitchen table while he opened a manila folder. "There's a couple things I want to go over. First, the report states there was unauthorized access to your land via a cut fence on the west side. You provided photos, tire tracks, timestamps, and documentation showing recent permit filings. Correct, correct. I've got backup copies too," he nodded. "Good. Now, second item. Morales mentioned you recorded a conversation with an attorney who admitted to a broader scheme involving zoning manipulation. Is that accurate?" Word for word. "I emailed the file to the DA's office." Reed tapped the folder. "We've got it." He pulled out another paper. "Last thing. You mentioned private security posing as county inspectors." "Yeah, they entered without consent, no identification, and tried to intimidate my crew." Reed leaned back in the chair, arms crossed. "That's impersonation of a public official. Combined with trespassing and destruction of property, we're looking at a potential pattern of organized misconduct. Just how serious are we talking?" He looked me straight in the eye. "If the HOA board orchestrated this as a coordinated action, and that audio backs it up, we're not just talking civil liability. We're talking criminal conspiracy, possibly racketeering if funds were misused." I exhaled. They really overplayed their hand. "That's putting it lightly," Reed said, standing. "We've already issued subpoenas for their financial records. By Thursday, the fallout started hitting the neighborhood like a thunderclap. First, Willow Heights Community Forum, usually filled with bake sale flyers and lawn care arguments, exploded into full chaos. Screenshots started circulating. Residents had discovered the HOA board had spent nearly $12,000 of community funds on the wedding under a vague line item labeled public event infrastructure. I didn't have to lift a finger. The residents turned on them like a dropped hornet's nest. Then came the emergency HOA meeting. I got invited officially. A certified letter taped to my gate. I didn't plan on attending until my neighbor Trevor, the HOA's lawyer who had tipped me off days earlier, called me from a number I didn't recognize. "They're trying to pin it all on me," he said quickly. "Elora's claiming I acted independently, that I misrepresented HOA intentions." "You told the truth," I know, but they're rewriting the narrative. You should come, bring your evidence. You're the only one who has everything lined up. So I did. The meeting was held in the Willow Heights Community Hall, a sterile, echoey room with folding chairs and a projector screen. The place was packed. Residents, local press, even a couple county officials in the back row. Word had gotten out. Elora stood at the podium, flanked by the remaining board members. She looked more brittle than usual, like a porcelain figurine under a heat lamp. We understand there have been concerns, she began, voice strained. Let me be clear, the board never authorized use of HOA funds for a private ceremony. This was a misunderstanding, and certain individuals acted outside their authority. That's when I stood up. Then explain this, I said, holding up a printed invoice with her signature at the bottom. This is from a rental company for the wedding chairs and tents billed to the HOA, signed by you. Gasps, murmurs, a few people with their phones up filming. Elora stared, mouth slightly open, as I walked to the front and handed the document to the moderator. And this, I continued, pulling out another sheet, is a permit application submitted to the county for a community celebration with my parcel number illegally entered as the location. More murmurs. Someone near the back booed. I didn't submit that, Elora said quickly. Your email is on it. So is the HOA letterhead. Trevor stepped forward. The entire board was copied on the approval chain. I warned them this would backfire. Lies, snapped Leonard Grissom, another board member. You were the one who said we could justify it. You told me you had Jennings' verbal consent, Trevor fired back. I never saw any proof. I raised my hand. Let's bring the conversation back to facts. I looked around the room. I'm not part of this HOA. I've never been. What happened wasn't a miscommunication. It was a coordinated effort to use my land and establish a legal precedent to annex it. When I refused, they trespassed, damaged my property, and impersonated officials. That's not a mistake. That's a crime. A woman in the front row stood up. My dues paid for your niece's wedding. You're the president, someone else shouted. You approved everything. Within moments, the room devolved into shouting. The moderator tried to restore order, but the crowd had already turned. Elora tried to speak again, but her voice was swallowed by outrage. I left before it got worse. That night, I got a call from Detective Reed. Just thought you'd want to know, he said. The DA's officially opened a criminal case. Elora Simmons and 2 other board members are being charged with fraud, criminal trespass, and conspiracy to commit zoning manipulation. We're also looking into misuse of public funds. Appreciate the update, he paused. And Jennings, thanks for documenting everything the way you did. Most people don't think to keep records until it's too late. You made the case airtight. I hung up and stepped outside. The stars were out, clear and sharp above the pasture. The steel frame still stood unfinished but solid. I decided it was time to complete it, not because I needed a feed barn, but because I wanted a reminder that when people try to take what's yours while hiding behind fake authority, you don't bow, you document, you stand. You answer their clipboard with iron and steel, and sometimes you build a barn just to ruin their party. The morning after the emergency meeting, the air around Willow Heights felt different. Tension still clung to the hedges and sidewalks, but it had shifted direction. For the first time in years, Elora Simmons' grip on the neighborhood had cracked. Residents walked their dogs with purpose, whispering in pairs, casting glances at the clubhouse like it was radioactive. No one waved at Elora anymore. I spent that morning finishing a new fence line steel posts this time, concrete footings, and a gate with a coded lock. Not because I thought anyone would try again, but because it felt right to turn the page with something permanent. Something that couldn't be cut through with hedge trimmers and entitlement. Around noon, a county vehicle returned, but this time it was from the auditor's office. A woman named Patris Holloway stepped out, clipboard tucked under her arm, with the steady posture of someone used to bureaucratic trench warfare. She didn't ask to come inside, just met me by the fence and got right to it. "We've got irregularities in the HOA's financials going back almost 4 years," she said. "Your case triggered a full audit." "Figures," I said, tightening a bolt on the gate. "Vendor invoices don't match bank statements." Event expenses were rerouted through something labeled Community Enrichment Disbursements, and there's a recurring payment to a company called Bright Trail Consulting. "Never heard of it." "Neither had we," she said. "Until we traced the registration address. It's a P.O. box in town." The owner listed is a shell corporation, but the contact name on the Articles of Incorporation, Leonard Grissom. I looked up, eyebrows raised. "Board member, vice president," she confirmed. "We've handed it all to the district attorney." I leaned against the fence post, letting the weight of that settle. "They tried to annex my land," I said, "and they were running a side business out of HOA coffers." "Looks like they were siphoning funds," she said. "Consulting fees for services that never existed. Bright Trail invoiced for community outreach strategy sessions, but there's no meeting minutes, no records, no deliverables." "And Elora," she signed off on every check. That afternoon, residents began organizing their own investigation. A group of 6 homeowners knocked on doors with clipboards and printouts, gathering signatures. They weren't interested in waiting for the legal process to finish. They wanted the entire board removed. Not just Elora and Leonard, but every officer who turned a blind eye. One of them, a retired school principal named Dana, stopped by my place to ask me to speak on their behalf at the upcoming recall vote. "I'm not part of your HOA," I reminded her. "That's exactly why it matters," she said. "You're the one they couldn't control. People respect that. They need to see there's another way to handle power." I agreed, reluctantly. Never cared for the spotlight, but I wasn't about to let the same people who tried to steal my land slink away and rewrite the ending. 2 days later, the recall meeting was held under the same roof as the last disaster. But this time, the room was packed wall to wall. Folding chairs had been replaced with standing room only. There were no pastries or coffee, just angry residents and a microphone. The board sat at a long table, flanked by 2 attorneys who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. A county representative from the Civil Oversight Committee stood near the front, clipboard in hand, watching everything. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't use notes. "I don't live here," I began, "but I've spent the last month dealing with the consequences of what happens when a group of people decide they're above the law." I paused, letting that land. They didn't just plan an event on my land. They falsified permits. They destroyed property. They tried to reclassify my ranch by using your neighborhood as a pawn, and they did it all while funneling your money through fake companies. A ripple of murmurs passed through the crowd. "You don't need me to tell you what that is. You already know. The question is whether you're willing to clean house or if you're going to let them keep calling the shots while you pay the bills." When I stepped down, Dana gave me a quiet nod. A few people clapped, then a few more, then the whole room. The board tried to defend themselves, but the momentum was gone. One resident after another stood up, telling stories of unexplained dues increases, fines for non-existent infractions, and intimidation tactics. It all added up. A pattern. A rotten foundation. The vote was held by secret ballot. 92% voted for removal. Every board member was stripped of their position, effective immediately. The county rep collected the results and made it official. That night, I sat on my porch, watching the sun dip behind the hills. The unfinished barn caught the last of the light, casting long shadows across the grass. I hadn't decided whether I'd finish it or tear it down and start fresh. Either way, it had served its purpose. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a message from Morales. Grissom was arrested this morning. Wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy. Elora turned herself in an hour later. I didn't reply. Just stared at the text for a while, then set the phone down and walked the fence line. The grass near the gate had started to grow back, soft green blades pushing through the dirt where the tent platforms had been. Nature, reclaiming herself. The new HOA board, led by Dana, sent me a letter of apology handwritten, signed by every member. They asked if they could hold a community volunteer day to help repair the damage along the creek. I agreed, not because I wanted to make peace with the neighborhood, but because I believed in giving second chances to the right people. 2 weeks later, a team of residents showed up with gloves, shovels, and wheelbarrows. They didn't bring cameras or banners, just sweat and time. We worked side by side, clearing debris, rebuilding the banks, planting native shrubs along the edge. Elora's name didn't come up once. Later that month, I got a call from the county commissioner's office. They wanted to feature my case in a new public awareness campaign about property rights and HOA overreach. "You're the example of how to fight back without crossing the line," the commissioner said. "I just didn't like being lied to," I replied. "We're proposing new legislation," he added, "to prevent annexation attempts without a public hearing and owner consent. Your case will be Exhibit A." I agreed to testify if needed, not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted to make sure no one else had to weld a barn just to defend what was theirs. I finished the structure that fall. Not as a barn, but as a workshop, my own forge with a wide, open bay and reinforced steel walls. I named it the Line Shed. A quiet little nod to the boundary no one gets to cross without permission, and every time I fired up the torch, I remembered exactly why it stood there, not to keep people out, but to remind them who was willing to stand their ground when no one else would.